Today, we are very pleased to have Reid here to talk about synthetic data, how we are going to use it and what we should be watch out. So let's welcome Aaron.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm Aaron Reid from Sentient Decision Science, and we are talking today about why GenAI, including synthetic data, needs continuous human data to function well. And this is about making an emotional connection that will drive innovation. While we're pulling that up, anybody using generative AI in their innovation process now? Yeah. Anybody using LLMs in their daily lives now? Yeah. We're good? Thank you. So this will be very relevant. We'll start with this issue. We're a behavioral science-based technology firm, and we quantify what people can't say or won't say. This is an issue that's facing us in innovation. It's an issue that's facing large language models and the knowledge worker. There are limits to explicit post-rationalized responses, survey data, explicit responses we get from consumers, because consumers aren't always rational, and they're not always eager or able to admit the true drivers of their behaviors. And yet we have to have human insight in order to develop new product that's going to be successful in the market. We're going forward, right? Yeah. This creates a data-rich but insight-poor environment. And in this age of AI, this new age of automated insight and output, we still are missing what consumers can't or won't tell us, either through their behavior or through probing on their behavior. So we're all aware of this to some degree. If that's moving forward, we're going forward, right? Yep. Good? Awesome. So we know emotion, intuition, bias, implicit bias, these drive behavior below our conscious awareness. This is a key component. Nonverbal communication is often the most important form of communication. And brands often lack real-time access to this unspoken layer. So automated behavioral science. Behavioral science is going to give us causal evidence, scientific evidence of the drivers of behavior, not relying solely on what people say, but observing what they do and doing it within a controlled environment so we actually know the causal factors. And automated behavioral science accelerates that process. You don't have to be in a lab. You can do this type of research and gain this insight from online work with your consumers. Automated behavioral science quantifies attention, it quantifies emotion, it quantifies the non-conscious mind, what people are thinking, the spreading activation of their system 1 processing, as well as their system 2 or rational thoughts. That type of insight, system 1 and system 2 data, is more accurate at predicting product success in the market. Use that one, okay. There we go. So as we're quantifying this unspoken, what do we need to bring to the technology? We need to combine that behavioral science with emotion AI as well as predictive AI. We need this to be scientifically validated, globally relevant, and there has to be significant consideration for privacy. And then finally, if we're doing this well, we'll be in a position collectively as a marketing innovation industry to produce norms, global norms, on non-conscious response of consumers. That's part of the promise of quantifying the unspoken. What does this do for us from an innovation perspective? If we take automated behavioral science and combine it with emotion AI, it allows us to better understand category extensions. Where can we compete most effectively? It reduces the time of screening all of those ideas. I watched Estee Lauder present a couple of weeks ago. Their innovation process reduced from 4 to 6 weeks to 2 to 3 days, from early concept ideation into validated new product ready for development. That's very exciting. It will reduce risk in new product development itself. And it does so by more accurately predicting real-world behavior, not just stated intent. So the best innovation development frameworks inject this behavioral science along the path. Here is an example of a path that we use for innovation. First step being discovery. First of all, understanding implicitly where your brand is, what is true, distinct, and valuable for your brand. Understanding that at the implicit level allows you to understand where you can extend most successfully as a brand. Once you understand what's true of it, evaluating extension categories. Where could you take your brand? What kinds of competition are in that category, and are you already in a position to compete well for unmet needs from your brand? That's step one, discovery. And automated behavioral science, understanding the non-conscious mind, allows you to compete more effectively at that early stage. Then obviously moving into concept screening. We just talked about 4 to 6 weeks down to 2 to 3 days. Concept screening, taking hundreds of ideas, boiling them down to the most promising ideas, not just based on what people say, but experimentally deriving their emotional reaction through automated behavioral science. And then finally moving into new product development. Once you have that winning idea, how does it need to fit from a features, a benefits, a positioning perspective in the market? The last step, which is often lost, is optimizing it at launch. Taking all of that insight from the beginning of your process through the concept creation and screening into optimizing the message at market. I'll give you just a couple of examples here from each stage. One more second. So much setup. There we go. Yeah? Okay. You probably know Flowers Foods. Anybody here from Flowers? Dave's Killer Bread, Wonder Bread, Nature's Own, really strong, well-known brands within that category. These brands, using implicit automated behavioral science, were able to identify across 31 potential extension categories where their brands could play most effectively. What's true about Dave's Killer Bread? What's true about Wonder Bread? Very different brands. And so where you can go with the extensions of those brands matters according to what's already true and valuable and distinct about your brand. Once we understand those things that are true and distinct and valuable, we can evaluate the categories that offer the greatest promise. That's an example from Flowers. If we go sort of mid-stage of that process, here's an example from Doritos of identifying a winning new product concept. This one with Frito-Lay was screening hundreds of concepts using implicit automated behavioral science, winnowing the list down to the most promising concepts, and identifying which of those product concepts fit with what was true of the brand and how it could be extended into a category. This was both in terms of brand fit as well as near-term sales. This resulted in this particular product launch. Doritos Loaded was the #1 product launch at 7-Eleven through automated behavioral science testing and optimizing the messaging. And then finally, just another example. Everybody aware of the surge in the non-alcoholic beer category over the last few years? Somebody in alcohol here? Yeah. It's been amazing. And Heineken really sought to be one of the leaders in the NA category with its launch of 0.0. And it wasn't simply identifying the growth opportunity. It was actually bringing the brand to market in a way that was consistent and distinct. And here's an example from their social campaign. I don't know if you've got volume, but let's not mess with it. Oh my goodness, I'd play it over again, but again, I'm not gonna mess with it. What a great activation. That was one of many within their campaign. And it delivers the benefit immediately, captures attention, breaks through, it delivers the benefit immediately. So that's automated behavioral science, allowing you to understand stoppage, breakthrough, decay rate on your social, as well as an emotional connection and its ability to deliver for the brand. Okay, this all sounds wonderful. There must be a problem, right? What is the problem? So being able to take that development process from 4 to 6 weeks down to 2 to 3 days, it sounds like we all should be doing it and implementing it immediately. Why wouldn't you save that time and save that money? It was really stable diffusion that revolutionized image creation from like text prompts. And with large language models, about 3.0 at ChatGPT and beyond, we started to see an interface that allowed many to use this in a way that was never accessible before. When you take those advances in technology and data modeling and use it to create personas of, say, your target audience, you can then create synthetic data sets and test your concepts with those created personas to evaluate what may or may not be successful. It sounds wonderful, and in many cases, it is actually accelerating our innovation success. But we are facing a challenge now as marketers, innovators, and insights professionals. While generative AI is accelerating and creating an immediate advantage, it is simultaneously accelerating a massive regression to the mean. Any statisticians in the room? Oh my goodness, a massive regression to the mean. And from a data science perspective, it's astounding to me that we don't recognize that more universally as an industry that's focused on data and insights. So I wanted to take you through this paper in Nature by Shmylov et al. In 2024, published in July. And in this paper, they warn that as these generative AI models, LLMs, for example, are trained on data increasingly generated by those models, they experience model collapse. So when we think about where they're trained, it's on the written word. First of all, it's spoken, right? That data is the spoken word, written spoken word, not the non-conscious. That's the starting point. And second, it is now the data coming out of those models is taking up an increasing proportion of publicly available written word to be scraped in the future. With me so far? So this makes sense, right? Because why do these happen? AI models collapse when they're trained on recursively generated data. It's because they start losing information about the original distribution. And there's two forms of this data collapse. One is early stage model collapse. And in early stage collapse, the next generation models lose information about the tails. Where does creativity lie? It's right at the center of the distribution, right? No. So this is relevant for innovation because innovation requires creativity. And if the data that we're functioning on is losing the creative portion of the distribution, we're going to regress to the mean. In late stage collapse, successive model generations tend to converge to a point estimate with very little variance. So we no longer have a distribution, we just have a point estimate. And from a point estimate, you can only randomly project out. You can put a random parameter into your model and you can generate random variance. Who wants random variance? Our job is to understand natural variance and be able to predict it. So if this is what's happening at a broad scale within our LLMs and the data that's going to be available publicly, imagine what's happening in our smaller world here, where we're trying to generate new product concepts, put them out into market based on existing information today. The next generation of our innovation is going to be more average, and it's going to accelerate in that direction. How do you counteract this? Error compounds over generations. Instead of showing you graphs, take a look at this one. This is fun to watch. This is the input. This was also from the paper, and this was a text output of an OPT model. And the input was this. Some started before 1360, was typically accomplished by a master mason and a small team of itinerant masons supplemented by local parish laborers, according to Points Wright. But authors reject this model, suggesting instead that leading architects designed the parish church towers based on early examples of perpendicular as the input. Here's the first generation output. Okay, not too bad. We got one little at in there, but then hyphen though, semicolon those. Here's the next generation output. This is the model trained off of the output from the first model. St. Peter's Basilica in Buenos Aires, built during the reign of his successor, Pope Innocent. Here's the fifth generation, which had been translated into more than 100 languages, including English, French, German. What was it even talking about? Here's the ninth generation. In addition to being home to some of the world's largest populations of black at-tailed jackrabbits, while at-tailed jackrabbits, blue at-tailed jackrabbits, red yellow is nonsense. That's a model trained on the output of a model, trained on the output of a model, without any fresh data injected into it. There is a solve here. Here is an example of a model trained on generated data from the original model. First, that second model has 2 times the perplexity, which means it's much more uncertain as to what to predict next. And again, our job is to be able to predict what's next. In addition, that model has very small variance, and you'll see how small in a second. In this test, they did a second condition where they injected 10% of real human data back into the training set. And here's what happens. The perplexity jump is much less, it is much less perplex, meaning it goes from a 32 to about a 42, 43, as opposed to a 63. So we're increasing certainty in the model simply by injecting 10% more real human data into that model. And also notice the variance. We have a greater distribution around that data. And that's only 10% of the data. And it's only 10% of spoken data. And remember, the vast majority of unspoken data has a significant influence on people's behavior. So this is why we believe behavioral science is AI's missing link in the future. Because by quantifying the non-conscious and the emotional and injecting that into AI models along with the conscious, we can avoid that model collapse. It means you can't just do it once. It's not like we can just take all of the unspoken right now and put it into these models and we're good. We have to continually inject these AI models with fresh human data. Not to mention that human values and what we want tends to change over time. Behavioral science can help us probe deeper. It captures those emotional and motivational truths. This automated behavioral science is also a natural bot killer. You've heard about fraud and bots taking surveys in our industry, 30%, 36%, I forget what Lenny Murphy said. Automated behavioral science immediately removes all the bots, so you have real human data. And it actually represents the language of the real human mind. That makes this data and the work that we do in this industry as marketers, innovators, insights pros, not less relevant in the age of AI. It makes us more relevant. Anybody worried about their job? Not before this talk, yes. Not after this talk. The work that we do in understanding humans and getting deeper insight into the true drivers of behavior is going to become increasingly important as AI accelerates a regression to the mean. We're the champions of the future. We've got to do it responsibly. We want to mitigate bias, having whole human representation, not just conscious data, but non-conscious data, testing diverse audiences, doing it with true implicit measures, eliminating bots and fraud for higher quality data, and always on testing, so we're continually generating new learning and improving these models. And that's going to produce AI that doesn't just help us now, here in the next 6 months, by taking our innovation from 4 to 6 weeks to 2 to 3 days. It's going to make our innovation process accelerated and more successful for the next 4 to 6 years. Please come talk to us if you'd like to learn more. You can tell that this is the beginning of a very important conversation for us in our industry. We'd love to see you. We are out here, and I'd love to take with any time we have left any questions. Yes.
I think we still have time for one question, actually.
This is fascinating. How do you capture emotional data from consumer?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I'll go into depth. If you'd like, we can have a deeper conversation around that. You familiar with implicit association testing, the non-conscious methods? No? Psychologists interested in understanding stereotypes and biases in the mid-90s developed a technique that allowed them to understand how people truly felt about other groups of people without asking any explicit questions. Because if you're studying stereotypes or biases and you ask somebody, hey, do you have a bias against that group of people? What are they going to say? No. They're going to say no, and they're going to do it for at least 2 reasons. One, they don't want to admit it, because, oops, it's socially embarrassing. Two, they might do that to you if you ask that question. But 2, and this is the bigger problem, they often are not aware. That's the implicit nature of that bias. And so psychologists develop these techniques to measure that kind of automatic association, system 1, among groups of people, with gender bias, racial bias, ageism. We take that same technique and say that can be applied to anything that someone either is not eager or able to admit. And so it gives us access to how people truly are feeling without relying solely on what they say. There's a lot more, but that's one example. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think the democratization of these tools like generative AI is great.
Yeah.
However, the tool doesn't make the outcome. The hammer doesn't make the carpenter. So having a hammer is great. It could be added to your portfolio of tools. But at the end of the day, it has to be integrated into a greater whole, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Why do you think we've raced to the tool is it, rather than...
Oh, I love that question. I've been pulling my hair out, as you can tell, over it. It's so exciting. I think, at the end of 2022, I think many of us were in disbelief. How is it possible? And the outputs from those generative AI models are delivered in such a way that they feel like truth. When you get an output from a generative LLM, it's positioned as truth. Oh, and they're so polite. So I would love to talk more about that, but I think the great wonder of it really just took us by storm. It is opening up a tremendous new area of research on data science and advancement, but it's coming with an awful lot of dangers. It looks like we've got to wrap up. Yeah?
Yes. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you all for joining the session.
Yep. Thank you.